the question of the pupil. You have suggested, rather arrogantly, if I may say so, that there is so far no understanding at all of what it was that Gurdjieff was teaching. This seems an extraordinary statement. Could you justify it, perhaps, and explain it a little bit for us? The teacher replies, well, there is no description anywhere of Gurdjieff's teaching except in Gurdjieff's own book, The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson. There is no statement, no description anywhere, despite the thousands of books that are written about Gurdjieff, despite the thousands of articles and talks about Gurdjieff. There is no statement, there is no description of Gurdjieff's teaching. All these books are about the Gurdjieff tradition, what I call the Gurdjieff tradition, coming from Ouspensky. They're about Ouspensky's teaching and attribute Ouspensky's teaching to Gurdjieff, as if this was what Gurdjieff was teaching, and it isn't. So we have to start from there. Now, as I'm speaking, it's January 2025. So it's 100 years, almost to the day, since Gurdjieff started to write his book, The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson. 100 years. Between 1925 and about 1930, he wrote this book. It was not published. Gurdjieff died in Paris in 1949, and this book was published in 1950. So it has been available to the ordinary man in the street for 75 years. But there is no other book that speaks about Gurdjieff's teaching. This is the only book. All the other books about Gurdjieff are talking about Ouspensky's teaching and attributing it, because of the existence of the book In Search of the Miraculous, attributing this teaching of Ouspensky's to Gurdjieff, as if this is what Gurdjieff was teaching. So it might be useful, 100 years having passed, it might be useful perhaps if I explain to you what Gurdjieff's teaching is, and perhaps even explain to you what it isn't. Because it isn't psychology. That's the first thing to understand. Gurdjieff was not teaching psychology. Ouspensky was. So this is a major difference between the two teachings, this Gurdjieff tradition that everyone is writing about, and Gurdjieff's actual teaching. Gurdjieff was not teaching psychology. He's credited with saying, and this comes from Ouspensky, he's credited with saying man is a machine. But he does not write this. This is not Gurdjieff's teaching. And of course it's not true. There are many, many arguments to show that man is not a machine. Indeed, we can say organic life obeys completely different laws, scientific laws, to machines. And we can show this quite easily. Later on I'll do so, if you wish. Some elementary laws, scientific laws, that show that organic life, of which man is a part, obeys completely different laws to machines. So, man is a machine is attributed to Gurdjieff. It's not true. But it is attributed to Gurdjieff in Ouspensky's book In Search of the Miraculous, and Gurdjieff, if I remember rightly, is in a sense echoing something that Ouspensky himself has said. It is as if Ouspensky has suggested man is a machine entirely controlled by external forces. This sounds like Ouspensky. And Gurdjieff is, in replying to a question, bouncing this back to him Man is a machine entirely controlled by external forces. Let's suppose that's so. Now Gurdjieff is using this idea, we are studying man as if a machine. It's not man is a machine. We're studying man as if man is a machine. Now I said Gurdjieff was not teaching psychology. He was teaching the structure and the energies of man, in the way we would study a machine. If I'm going to study my motor car, I'm not studying its psychology. I'm studying its structure and the energies and fuels and lubricants in that machine, how it all works as a machine. It has nothing to do with psychology. So Gurdjieff's teaching, first of all, is about the structure and energies of a man. Nothing to do with psychology. There is no psychology in Gurdjieff's teaching. Now, if I'm going to describe Gurdjieff's teaching to you, I can say that it is about structure and energy of a man, and there are two distinct structures that exist in the ordinary man that we have, in a sense, fallen into, which prevent any development on our part. So Gurdjieff's teaching is that for the ordinary man or woman, no development at all is possible. Indeed, any attempt to change ourselves in any way does not work, and in fact only makes our situation worse. So Gurdjieff's teaching is that we can't develop in any way, and the reason is that we have two structures in us that we have fallen into. Now we have fallen into them because we lack the energies that we should have. So this is a third point, which is which oversees the whole thing, and that is that there is a break in the chain of energetic production in man and woman. So there is a break in this chain of energetic production. We don't have the energies we should have for a normal life. As a result of this, we have to adapt to this shortage of energy, this lack of energy in us. And in so doing, we fall into two distinct structures, structural situations, which prevent us from developing in any way. And Gurdjieff's teaching is that we, and I'll explain these in a moment, as far as I'm able in the time we've got, but Gurdjieff's teaching is that if we can remedy this break in the chain of energetic production in us, then we can raise the whole organism up energetically to a new level at which we can emerge from these structures, these two structures that prevent us from developing. So that's Gurdjieff's teaching. It is about structure, it is about energies. It is about our lack of energy because there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. And as a result of this, not having sufficient energies, we've had to adapt to this, and we fall into two distinct structural situations. That's Gurdjieff's teaching. And what he is teaching, he says, is a transformation. He spoke of this to Ouspensky as the stairway. We've got to raise the energetic level of the whole organism, man or woman. We've got to raise the energetic level of the whole organism up to a point at which our own individual development can begin. So as an overall viewpoint, we've got to remedy this break in the chain of energetic production in us so that we have the normal energies, we have all the energies that we should have, at least as far as is possible for us to have in our circumstances. And this will raise the whole organism up so we can emerge from these two structural situations and can then begin to develop. Our own individual development can then begin. So this is Gurdjieff's teaching. Now, I suspect that if you are hearing this for the first time, you will have questions. So probably the best way for me to deal with this, to explain these three areas. First of all, this break in the chain of energetic production in us. And then the other two are these two structural situations that we've fallen into, explaining those. And then you will start to see, I hope, have the possibility in the course of time of confirming all this from your own experience, from your work upon yourself. This is what a group is for. We have this study of the structure and energies of a man, and we are going to confirm all this by means of our own experience and our own activities. So, are there any questions? The question of the pupil. What you have said seems to us impossible to understand. Could you perhaps explain to us what you mean when you say there is a break in the chain of energetic production in the ordinary man? Is it possible to start with this, and what does this mean? The teacher replies, right, what I'll do first is to take the first of these structural situations and describe it to you. So I've said already in the brief introduction, the simple introduction, I've said already that there are two structural situations we are in, and we are in those situations because of the third fact, a third situation, which is that there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. So we don't have the energies we should have. So we've fallen into these two structural situations. Now the first one is, as Gurdjieff writes, we are three-brained or three-centered beings. So we have three centers. And there is a flow of energy. So three centers is a structure, isn't it? And there is a flow of energy between these three centers. Now, the situation we've fallen into is that at any one time, only one of those centers is active. That is to say, it can, if we take the thinking centre, the head, thinking centre, or intellectual centre, sometimes Ouspensky refers to it that way. But if we take the head, then this flow of energy is, for a short while, in the head. This allows us either the possibility of perceiving the world outside us, that is, looking outwards, or that centre, we can think with it, using the associations already present in that centre. Excuse me. However, almost immediately, the flow of energy in us moves to another centre. So then we forget entirely what happened in that intellectual centre, because we are now in a different centre. Let's say it's the feeling centre in the chest. And we're dealing with emotions, likes and dislikes, pleasant and unpleasant. And we forget entirely what we were thinking about, or what we were perceiving from the thinking centre. And then almost immediately, this flow of energy flows back to the head. Suddenly we remember, oh, I was thinking about that, or I was looking at that. But by the time we've realised that we are back in the head, and of course we don't realise this because we don't acknowledge this flow of energy in us between the three centres. But by the time you're back in the head and start to realise and start to think again, this flow of energy moves on now to the moving centre, or the physical centre, instinctive centre. And we forget entirely what we were thinking about, and of course we've forgotten about the likes and dislikes and the pleasant and unpleasant emotions in the feeling centre. Instead, we are dealing with sensations or movements. And then almost immediately this flow of energy flows back into the feeling centre. And we've forgotten about sensations, we've forgotten about movements, and we are back with likes and dislikes and pleasant and unpleasant emotions. And then it flows back into the moving centre, into the physical centre, and we're back with our sensations and the movements, and we forget entirely about our likes and dislikes and the pleasant and unpleasant emotions. And then it flows from the physical back to the head, and the whole cycle starts again. As we suddenly find ourselves back in our head, oh, I remember, and start to try to think again. By the time we've started to do so, this flow of energy has already moved on back to the feeling centre. So there is this flow of energy between the three centres in man. And this means that at any one point, only one of those centres has the possibility of being in contact with the world around us. The other two are always working by associations only. And equally it means that we can't remember ourselves, we can't remember anything, because we are constantly moving between the three centres, and each centre has no possibility of remembering what went on in the other centres. So this flow of energy between the three centres, I know Ouspensky says there are not three centres in the ordinary man, but we must leave this to one side. We're talking here about Gurdjieff's teaching, not Ouspensky's. Gurdjieff always writes of man as a three-centred or three-brain being. And this is the reason, because this is the structure, the structural situation we're in. We have three centres, and there is this flow of energy constantly between the three centres. It's a flow that is predictable and can be, in fact, it is the inner figure of the Enneagram, something that Gurdjieff did not write about, but he did give to Ouspensky, and we have a record of this. But there is this flow of energy between the three centres that is going on all the time. So, for example, when Gurdjieff says we can't remember ourselves, the ordinary man cannot remember himself, this is what he's talking about. He's not teaching psychology, he's teaching the facts of this structural situation. We can't remember ourselves. We can't remember ourselves in either sense of the term. We can't remember ourselves in the sense of remembering what happened in the past, because we're in a different centre. And the centres can't remember what the other centres were doing. So we can't remember the past. And equally, we can't be present in our activities, because at any one time, only one centre has the possibility, and a possibility only, of being in contact with the world around us. So we can't be present in our activities because we're only present in one centre. The other two centres are working by associations only. So this is the structural situation that is the background or the core of what Gurdjieff was teaching Ouspensky. Ideas about self-remembering. It's not a psychological insight, it's a truth from a structural situation. Now we've fallen into this situation because of a shortage or lack of energy. That is to say, we should be able not to identify with this flow of energy in us. We should have a fourth something in us, independent of this flow of energy in us. This is actually not very difficult to do. But of course, the ordinary man does not know about this structural situation, these three brains, and the flow of energy between them constantly taking place. And so the ordinary man does not make the efforts, or does not use, in fact, the techniques freely available to separate himself from this flow of energy, leading in the course of a long period of time to a more normal situation. This is an abnormal state, to be living in this structural situation. And Gurdjieff's teaching is that we can only get out of this abnormal situation, this abnormal structural situation. We can only get out of it once we recognise it and discover the techniques, or learn the techniques to get out of it. So this is the first structural situation that Gurdjieff is pointing out. And it is interpreted in the Gurdjieff tradition, of course, as psychology. We can't remember ourselves and things like this. But these are the consequences of the structural situation. These are the effects of a structural situation. And Gurdjieff is teaching the structure and energies of a man, not the psychology. Because we can't change the psychology. The psychology is an effect of a cause, and the cause is the structure. Three brain beings with this flow of energy of attention taking place constantly between these three centres. We are trapped in this situation. So that's the first structural situation that Gurdjieff is teaching. Any questions? The question of the pupil. You mentioned in your introduction that there are two structural situations that we have fallen into. So inevitably the question is going to be, what is the second structural situation, or energetic situation, as you say, that we as ordinary men and women have fallen into? The teacher replies, now, if we look at the second structural situation that we've fallen into, this was going to sound very simple, but in fact it's not. It's much more complex. It's mind-boggling, in fact. Gurdjieff writes almost at the very start of his book, The Tales of Beelzebub, to his grandson, that man has two consciousnesses having nothing in common. Man has two consciousnesses having absolutely nothing in common, he says in the chapter on hypnosis, for example. He reiterates this fact, two consciousnesses, two conscious minds, this means. We have two conscious minds, and essentially Gurdjieff is pointing out that we are living in the wrong one. We are living in a false self, a false conscious mind, and in fact at a lower level than we should be, because we lack the energies. There is a break in the chain of energetic production in us, so we have a shortage or lack of energies, so we are forced into a structural situation where we are living in a false, fictitious and unreal conscious mind at a lower level than we should be. This is everything that we are as ordinary men and women. We're in a false conscious mind. So Gurdjieff was pointing out that we are living, to Ouspensky and others, that we are living in a false conscious mind. We are not ourselves. But Gurdjieff says our true conscious mind remains in us in an isolated state. It remains in us, he says, in a primitive state. Why? Because we lack the energies. It lacks the energies. Our true conscious mind doesn't have the energies as fuel to manifest as it should. Why doesn't it have the energies? Because there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us, which we're going to look at in a moment. but we have two conscious minds having nothing in common. Now this at first sounds like something you already know, because you've probably heard of Freud. I don't know what he wrote, but he wrote something about conscious mind and unconscious mind. So we have this idea in the background, and we think we can understand it. We have two conscious minds. What's the problem? You've heard of Jung. We have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And it's part of our common parlance that we talk about the subconscious, as if we know what we're talking about. So it's very easy. This is a structural situation. We have two minds. We're living in the wrong one. We're living in a false mind, but our true mind remains in us. So in this situation, we can't develop in any way, because if we're trying to develop ourselves, what we are trying to develop is the false mind. And a false mind is not going to develop, except in a false direction. And of course, the false mind is never going to develop to become a true mind, because our true mind already exists inside us in an isolated state. So we can't develop in any way in this structural situation. Now, I've said it sounds a very simple structural situation, but it's actually not. And you've got to be very careful, because if we take Freud, conscious mind, unconscious mind, Jung, conscious mind, subconscious mind, and all the teachings that you have heard about so far, they all take the conscious mind as if that is us, as if that is what we are. It is what we are, but Gurdjieff is saying that this is the false, fictitious and unreal mind, and that the true mind in us is the subconscious, is the other mind. So it is our ideas of conscious mind and subconscious mind, but the other way round to our ordinary understanding of these terms. If we take Freud and Jung and all these marvellous teachers, they are teaching that the conscious mind is us, and that the subconscious mind is the little adjutant or lieutenant looking after us, the conscious mind. But there is a sense that Gurdjieff is saying the complete opposite. Gurdjieff is saying our true mind is the subconscious mind, or should be the subconscious mind. It isn't, because we lack energy. And we are the little adjutant, the lieutenant, thinking that we are ourselves, that this is us. And Gurdjieff is saying it's not. This is the structural situation. We're living in a false self at a very low level because we lack the energies. Our true conscious mind remains in us in an isolated state, and plays virtually no part in our lives. Why not? Because it doesn't have the energies as fuel to do so. So again, we've fallen into this situation. We have two conscious minds having nothing in common. We are living in the wrong one because of a lack of energies in us, because there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. So again, this is what Gurdjieff is trying to point out in his teaching, so that it becomes a part of our understanding, our experience, that actually, yes, we are living in a false self, we are living in a false conscious mind, we are living at too low a level, so no development at all can take place. And of course, why have we fallen into this structural situation? It's because there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. We don't have the energies we should have as normal men and women, and we've had to adapt to this situation by falling into this structural situation. We have two conscious minds having nothing in common. We are living in the wrong one. So that's the second structural teaching from Gurdjieff. And just to release a little niggle that is in me about this, if you look at the Gurdjieff tradition, if you look at all the books, the thousands of books written about Gurdjieff, there is not one single statement in those books to say that man has two conscious minds having nothing in common. which is one of the first things that Gurdjieff writes. This is very strange. So, any questions? There's a second structural situation that we've fallen into because of a lack of energy, because there is this break in the chain of energetic production in us. Any questions? The question of the pupil. You have suggested that we have fallen into two structural situations, structural and energetic situations, and that this is as a result of a lack of energies in us. That is to say, as you have explained, there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. Now, if we go back, I think our original question to you was, what is this break, or where is this break in the chain of energetic production in us? Where are we going wrong in terms of, as ordinary men and women, in terms of our energetic production? What exactly is, therefore, wrong with us? The teacher replies, so, there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. Where does this break occur? In order to see this clearly, we have to go back to Ouspensky, the book In Search of the Miraculous, because Ouspensky has produced a masterpiece in this respect. He has shown how, from the ray of creation, we can establish a table of hydrogens and energies at all different levels, or 12 different levels, and how these relate to, first of all, the ordinary man in our abnormal situation, and a second table showing how we should be as normal men and women. And this is absolutely clear, and you can understand this. Go to read this book, In Search of the Miraculous, and look at these two food diagrams. Put them side by side. One is for the ordinary man, you and I as we are now. The other is for the normal man, the man or woman as we should be, with a correct energetic background. And you can see the enhanced energetic background in the second food diagram. It's obvious. It's a picture, so it's obvious. But what is the difference between these two food diagrams? And we see straight away that the difference lies in the receipt of the food of impressions. Now, Gurdjieff is unique in describing a food of impressions. The idea that our impressions coming from perception, I need to add that, because this is not in Ouspensky. But Gurdjieff is unique in suggesting that our impressions coming from perception are a food, equivalent to a food. They are an energy that we must take in and we must digest. Now, if we look at the first food diagram, we see that the food of impressions sounds in us only as dough. It does not develop in any way. It is not digested by us as it should be. And to see how it should be digested by us, we look at the second food diagram. There, the food of impression sounds in us do, re, mi. So considerably enhancing our supply of these very intense, very subtle, higher hydrogens. But equally, as a result of this, a certain shock is given. And this becomes obvious in our experience as we develop, as a result of our work upon ourselves. A shock allows the food from the air and the atmosphere, the elements we take in from the air and the atmosphere, allows this octave, as it were, to develop even further. But all this depends upon the correct receipt of the food of impressions coming from perception. So we can see in these two food diagrams, one, the depleted energetic state of the ordinary man, you and I as we are. This is why we've fallen into these two structural situations I've just described. We don't have the energies we should have. But when we look at the second food diagram, showing the energetic background to a normal man, to a normal existence, this is what we should be, we can see the extraordinary degree to which this is enhanced by this one fact, the receipt of the food of impressions coming from perception. So this is where the break in the chain of energetic production occurs. Essentially, we don't perceive as we should. We don't perceive the world at all. Indeed, if we look at many people in the modern world. This is the reason we lack energies. This is the reason we have fallen into the structural and energetic situation that we have, the abnormal situation of the ordinary man. This is why we are stuck. It has nothing to do with psychology. It has nothing to do with remembering yourself, as the Gurdjieff tradition would suggest. It is to do with perception and the receipt, the correct receipt of the food of impressions. So we need to study, in terms of our own experience, our perception. And we can find techniques, we can learn techniques to enhance our perception of the world so that we start to receive the higher hydrogens, these energies, this background of this energetic background appropriate to a normal man. We can start to rebuild this energetic background. And it's all to do with perception. So the break in the chain of energetic production in us comes from perception, the fact that we do not perceive as we should. I think it's probably one of the first pages of Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, Gurdjieff's own book. He says, "In my opinion, the trouble with you in the present instance is perhaps chiefly due to the fact that while still in childhood, there was implanted in you an excellently working automatism." So far so good for the Gurdjieff tradition. An excellently working automatism. But an automatism for what? An excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. Food of impressions, perception. We have an automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. And this is the break in the chain of energetic production in us. So this can be remedied. And if we can remedy this over a long period of time, then we have the possibility of raising up the energetic level of the whole organism and of lifting ourselves by this means out of these two structural situations which are preventing our development. And that's Gurdjieff's teaching. The question of the pupil. What you are speaking about seems very strange to us and seems to bear little resemblance to the traditional teaching coming from Ouspensky, as you say, that we have learned. Ouspensky's teaching suggests, of course, that we can develop, we can evolve, and it is about psychology. You seem to be saying the opposite. You seem to be saying that Gurdjieff was teaching that we cannot evolve in any way. Any attempt to do so does not work and only makes our situation worse. And secondly, that Gurdjieff was not teaching about psychology, that psychology is a consequence of something else, that is to say, the structure and energies of a man. This sounds to us very strange. I'm finding it difficult to formulate a question about this. teacher replies. So, just a final word. Gurdjieff is teaching that as ordinary men and women, we cannot develop in any way at all. Any attempt to do so does not work and only makes our situation worse. Why? Because we're stuck in two structural situations. And we're stuck in these situations because we have a lack of energies. There is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. And we don't have the energies we should have, so we've fallen into these two structural situations, which mean we can't develop in any way. Gurdjieff's solution is that we require a transformation. Now, there are those who might suggest that a transformation is a change, so I've contradicted myself, but this is not true. The transformation that Gurdjieff is talking about is an energetic situation. It is a change in our energies to raise the energetic level of the whole organism up to another level, to the level of the normal man, to the level it should be as a normal man or woman. And only then do we have the possibility of any real, objective, individual development. Until then, we can't develop at all. Any attempt to do so does not work and only makes our situation worse. Now, the transformation, first of all, Gurdjieff spoke to Ouspensky about this as the stairway, so you can read that in Search of the Miraculous. But the transformation as a stairway has a series of stages or steps, and we have to follow these steps or stages in order. And in order to raise the whole organism, the energetic level of the whole organism, up to where it should be. And this is going to involve a very careful study of perception, because the break in the chain of energetic production in the ordinary man and woman comes from perception, the fact that we do not perceive, or that we perceive automatically. We have an excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. So Gurdjieff's solution, Gurdjieff's teaching, is a transformation. That a series of steps or stages lead to a raising of the energetic level of the whole organism to the level at which it should be, the level of the normal man, at which point our own individual development can then begin. So this is Gurdjieff's teaching. We have fallen to too low a level, we can't develop at all. But if we raise the energetic level of the whole organism, of ourselves as a unit, as an organism, to the point it should be, the level of the normal man, only then can our own individual development begin. So this is Gurdjieff's teaching. It's about structure, it's about energies. It's not about psychology at all. I don't think any aspect of Gurdjieff's teaching has anything to do with psychology. Psychology is the effect of a cause, and the cause is a structural and energetic cause. You can't change your psychology by psychological means. If you change the effect of a cause, then it will simply revert back to what it was, because the cause remains the same. The cause is a structural and energetic cause. But if we change the structure and energies, then the psychology will change, because it is an effect. So Gurdjieff was teaching structure and energies of a man. He's reported to have said man is a machine. This is not correct. This is not true. Literally, it's nonsense. But we can get the gist of what he meant, because we are studying man as if we are a machine. How do you study a machine? You study its structure, you study its energies, how it works. And if it doesn't work properly, you study what's wrong with it. And that's Gurdjieff's teaching.